Hey guys, I'm just going to fill you in on some Holocaust notes if you were not here when we took notes on the Holocaust. And this is for the quiz on historical context in regard to the Holocaust. So if you did not pass that quiz or you were not here for the notes, this is just your quick rundown of what we went through. I'm going to try to keep it as short as possible with the most pertinent information. But what you need to be doing is taking notes, and you can absolutely utilize these notes on the quiz. And we want to start practicing them in the form of mind mapping. So, sorry, I was pulling that up real quick. So if you weren't here the day before that, it was the first day of actually quarter two, where we went back through and thought about and reflected upon quarter one. And we did that in the form of mind maps. And so we discussed, what are mind maps? And so here's a couple examples. But mind maps essentially track your mind and what you're thinking, and it kind of allows you to organize information based on how your mind works, with the big concept, as you can see, like in the middle right here, convergence test, even though that's not English. You can see how this big concept yields multiple little topics, and then from those little topics has even more little topics, and you just kind of connect all of these different types of ideas together. And it's supposed to help you kind of memorize things a little bit quicker and figure out the way that your brain makes connections. Over here you can see, like with my biggest fear, the big things that it's connecting to: death, forgetting, airplanes, spiders, failure, the dark. And then underneath each of those big bubbles that link to my biggest fear are smaller bubbles. So if I'm afraid of airplanes, it's because of terrorists and turbulence. Or if I'm afraid of spiders, it's because of crawling up, like the feeling of a spider crawling up my arm, or spider bites. So you can see how these things kind of connect. Here's another example of other ones. It doesn't always have to be words. It can be pictures too, with words, but ultimately you're trying to connect ideas and create something that is visually stimulating to you that also models what your brain is thinking. Here's another example of just like a vocabulary set of notes that we're actually going to work on later for vocabulary in chapter 1 and note-taking and deconstructing of chapter 1 of Night. But here's an example of just something that kind of helps you organize information. Here's somebody who's obviously really good at note-taking as well. Or not just note-taking, but drawing. This is a reflective piece on this person. So that led to, if you missed the first day of quarter two, this is also something you should have in the grade book, but it's a reflection of first quarter, and it's kind of like a writing piece, but we're trying to model this mind map overall. And these are the 6 things that I wanted you to reflect on, and you didn't have to do it in this order or this structure. Some people did, some people didn't, but ultimately you needed to talk about accomplishments for first quarter, lessons learned, long-term goals, etc., etc. You can see. So that was due a while ago, but if you haven't done that, you can do that right now. It shouldn't take super long, but have fun with it. So with the whole Holocaust note-taking, this is our target for today, our learning objective. We want to create a mind map about the Holocaust. And I want you, so what I told my class is, if you were here, that you were to take notes in that kind of structure, or based on, anything that kind of helps you make order or sense of the information presented. So take as many notes as possible, connect the concepts and ideas, utilizing the concept of the mind map, and then you're able to actually utilize that mind map on your quiz that's coming up. So if this is your retake practice, maybe you need to add to your notes in order to retake, and that's fine. But by the end of this little spiel, you'll be able to determine the who, what, when, where, why, and how of the Holocaust in order to understand the cultural experience reflected in Night, which is our book. So we started off with the word Holocaust, and here's my chicken scratch up here, but with the word the Holocaust, and this should be at the center of your mind map, so go ahead and make that in the middle. We just did a quick brainstorm, like a quick just activating any prior knowledge that you have, activating schemata essentially, but make a list of everything you know about the Holocaust, anything that comes to mind when you hear the word. And so I had students brainstorm for like 30 seconds. What comes to mind when you think of the word Holocaust? And here's our brainstorm after 30 seconds. So gas chambers and death and Jews, the master race, people being shot, Auschwitz, experimental stuff, the Aryan race, which connects to the Aryan race, the Nazis, the Germans, the Hitler, SS. There's my swastika that I tried to draw, the German symbol that I obviously could not draw, World War II, the years that it happened. So this was just a brainstorm, and what was cool is seeing how much you guys already knew about the Holocaust, and it just kind of sets the scene for what we're going to talk about. So, brainstorm, add some words to your notes if you need to. The next thing we talked about was the book Night. And this is our second quarter novel that we're going to read in class together. And your goal is to, if you haven't gotten this already, you need to go to the book depository and check it out. And so far, this is the stuff that we knew about it. And so Night is based in the historical context of World War II. And it's written by a guy named Elie Wiesel, and it's about his experience with his father during the Holocaust in the Nazi German concentration camps through the years of 1944 to 45. This is actually a picture at the bottom here. This is him, Elie Wiesel, at the age of 15 in 1944, right before he actually entered the concentration camps with his dad. So through this story, Wiesel writes about the death of God and his own increasing disgust with humanity. So in the beginning, we learn a lot about Elie and how excited he is about learning about his Jewish heritage and how his faith really drives everything that he does, and how the Holocaust essentially kind of drove that belief and that faith in God out of his mind. Like, he really had a lot of anger towards God and humanity. But more specifically, the frequent themes that are going to be discussed in this book are right here, and they're emphasized throughout every single page, and that's apathy and empathy, and we're going to define those later, but we talked a lot about empathy last quarter, about feeling other people's feelings, or feeling what somebody else feels, and apathy is the opposite of that. So it's kind of like the absence of emotion, the absence of even caring, and we're going to see that apathy drives a lot of the decisions that the Nazis make. So in order to carry out such horrible atrocities on mankind, it's like you have to be numb and you have to be unable to feel in order to carry those things out. I just noticed a typo right here, so I'm going to change that. It's bugging me. The other thing that this book will talk about is inhumanity and injustice, and then faith and hope. So we'll break those down as we read more. And then, as you can see, just some of the pictures that I included here. This is Elie currently with Oprah. He is now a world-renowned author. He's also a professor, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, and world-renowned humanitarian. So there's amazing things that he's done. This is the book cover, and then this is a picture of actually Elie in the concentration camps. If you look right here, this is him in the barracks at the concentration camp. So there's a lot of historical pictures that feature him in there. So that's about Night. And then we wanted to provide some historical context on what the Holocaust is, so we understand the cultural experience reflected in this book. So you definitely need to write down this definition about what Holocaust means. It's a systematic, state-sponsored, which means, government-sponsored persecution and murder of millions of people, and specifically the Jews, which was taken out by the Nazi regime and its collaborators, and that was led by the leader of Germany, Adolf Hitler. So I feel like most people know this by now. You've had some schooling on this or education on this already. This, however, sacrifice by fire, is very important for you to know and may be seen on your quiz in the future. The word Holocaust is of Greek origin, and it means sacrifice by fire, since many of the crimes that were carried out and a lot of the ways that the Germans killed the Nazi was through fire. So whether that was through the crematorium and reducing bodies to ashes, or trenches that were, huge bonfires that people had to walk into fire. There's just lots of ways that Hitler and his Nazi regime carried out death through fire. And then here's just a couple pictures. The swastika, which I attempted to draw on that first slide. This was the symbol that represented the Nazi Party, and it actually used to mean the word peace. But obviously, through the use of how the Germans utilized it here, it no longer means that and is actually a tainted symbol that has a lot of negative connotation built in. This is obviously Hitler. You guys have probably seen lots of pictures of him, but just to kind of put this picture in your head, this is what we're dealing with here. Some background facts. I just wanted to show you the geographic location of Germany right here. And the majority of the Jews who were targeted lived in Eastern Europe, which was primarily Poland, and the Soviet Union, which was Russia or USSR. The population before the war was 9.5 million Jews, and then after the war, there was only 3.5 million Jews. So over 6 million Jews were terminated through World War II, specifically in the Holocaust. And I circled Hungary here because this is where Elie Wiesel lives in his book, and you can see, like, throughout his journey, he starts in, he references Budapest, which is right here, and Sziget is close, which is his hometown, and then he kind of migrates through all these different places to different concentration camps. Some facts you need to know is the Nazi Party came into power in Germany in 1933, and you should definitely know that it's circled for a reason. And they moved to annex Austria and Czechoslovakia, and really the German army was looking to extend their power in Central Europe to create more space for the Aryan race, the master race essentially, which we'll talk about. You also need to know that the beginning of World War II began in 1939 with the invasion of Poland and lasted until 1945, and that you should definitely be able to tell me that on a quiz. And then over the next couple of years, German forces conquered most of Europe, including the Soviet Union, which is Russia. The process for capturing Jews, you'll be tested on this also, so make sure you write this down. Homes, to ghettos, to cattle cars, to concentration camps, to the selection process. Selection process was the determination between who would live and who would die, and most people had no idea they were undergoing selection. So to the right was slave labor, and to the left was the gas chamber. Most people who went to the right for slave labor were men who could actually work. And then most people who went to the left were women and children. Babies had no chance of surviving or living. Young women might have had the choice for slave labor, but if they were a young mom, they would have never left their babies. So they are instantly led to the gas chambers, which we will talk about what those are. For the ghettos, these are just some pictures, but the ghettos were established and were aimed at isolating and persecuting the Jewish population. So we utilize this term also frequently now, but it's basically an impoverished area with limited freedom. And a lot of people obviously were isolated there. These are examples of guards, German guards, guarding the entrance of the ghettos. Here are some more pictures, but from the ghettos they went into cattle cars, as you can see here, which are like train cars basically, and that led them to the extermination or concentration camps, which were in occupied Poland. You can see this is the process of selection at Auschwitz. The women to the right, the men to the left. They didn't know this was the last time they would see each other. And then we talked about the three main concentration camps, the biggest one being Auschwitz, which with over 6 million Jews being killed in the Holocaust, at this specific site alone, over 1.5 million Jews were killed at this site, and it had 3 different entry points. So Auschwitz was right here, and that's Birkenau. That was the point of entry. Auschwitz I was like the torture center where Block 11 was. That'll be talked about in the video. And then Auschwitz III was like the slave labor camp. But there were also thousands of smaller concentration camps spread across Poland and Germany. Killing methods, make sure you know a couple of these killing methods for your test. Mobile killing units, like on the run, basically killing people as they annexed different places. Gas chambers, where they went into gas chambers and it was like a slow suffocation. Crematoriums and the ovens were where they reduced the body to ashes. And here's just pictures that are horrible to look at. 6 million Jews, bodies of bones, shoes, public hangings. And then please make sure you have these two definitions written down, anti-Semitism and the Aryan race. And that brings me to the end of my time